Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. Today we're going to be talking about how you can use Wix as the authentication solution for your web app. You may know Wix as that drag and drop editor for people who don't know how to code, but in addition to that, Wix has also not too long ago released a new product called Wix Headless, which essentially lets you use the Wix backend infrastructure and business solutions in order to build a web app in the framework of your choice. As part of this, you can also take advantage of their authentication in order to manage members and sessions, etc. inside of your own personal web app. And if you want to learn how to do all that and more, let's get started. Okay, so let me start off by saying that this tutorial is going to be slightly different than the usual in the sense that this tutorial is meant for web devs, so people who have some kind of background in web development and might even be completely new to the Wix environment, as opposed to people who come from the Wix environment and have no knowledge or minimal knowledge in web dev. Obviously, this is also a very useful tool for those who are coming from the Wix world, and you can use it to extend your website's functionality kind of beyond the confines of the Wix editor. But mostly I'm going to be approaching this topic as if you have no knowledge in Wix, but you do have a background in web dev, so you know some JavaScript, and you might be familiar with popular frameworks such as React and Next.js. Okay, so as I indicated in the introduction, today we're going to be talking about authentication. And if you've developed a website or a web app before, then you definitely know that authentication often ends up being the bottleneck of the project, and we waste a lot of time on it, and it's a huge hassle, even though it's something that should be rather straightforward and kind of cookie cutter. And there are different solutions out there for dealing with authentication, and each one is kind of opinionated in its own way, and it has its own price tag and limitations. And today I want to introduce you to an alternative coming out of a platform that you might not have recognized as offering this kind of service before, and that is Wix. So the Wix authentication solution is actually part of a larger project that Wix announced about half a year ago that's called Wix Headless. And this is a solution that allows you to access the various Wix solutions via JavaScript SDKs and REST APIs that they built out without having to actually build the front end of your website inside of the Wix editor. So you can go to the framework of your choice and build out a website and use Wix as a authentication solution, but also as a CMS, an e-commerce solution, etc. So today we're going to be talking about this part of the SDK, so the visitors and members, which handles auth and session management, etc. And we're going to be going through initially the tutorial that they have set up over here. So under tutorials and templates, we have JavaScript SDK tutorials. And here we have a quick start, which is essentially a tutorial explaining the whole auth and member management system. So we're going to work through that, which is a quite opinionated tutorial, and it shows how to implement it specifically in Next.js. And then we'll dive in and talk about how we could possibly implement this in other frameworks as well, and kind of take a broader look at this SDK. It's important to note that if you are not using JavaScript from your backend, you can still use this auth solution and the rest of the Wix Headless solutions. You'll just have to use a little more knuckle grease and use the REST APIs in order to implement it here in your backend. We're not going to touch on that today, but it should be rather similar, except for a little less ease of use that is provided by the JavaScript SDK. So in order to get started with the tutorial, I am here in VS Code, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a Next.js project. So I'm going to do that just using this line, which I copied from the Next.js website. And if you're not familiar with Next.js, it's a React framework that's quite popular today. I'm sure you've heard of it, at least if you haven't used it before, and I hope that this tutorial will give us some basic familiarity with the JavaScript SDKs before we hop in and try and do things by ourselves. So I'm just going to click here, enter, and go through the basic setup of creating the React app. So let's call this Wix demo. And would I use like TypeScript? No. Thank you. ESLint, yes. Tailwind, yes. Source, yes. Let's use a source directory. App router, so that's kind of like a new version of Next.js that came out, if I'm not mistaken, with Next.js 13, which kind of changed the whole concept and caused a lot of people to need to shift over to new stuff. But I'm going to use the app router because that's the newest version of Next.js. and customize default. No, we don't need to do that. So while my Next.js project is getting set up, let's start by initiating the Wix side of things. So again, I'm assuming that you have never used Wix before, so the first thing you're going to need to do is to set up your Wix account. If you already have a Wix account, then all you need to do is create a new website, and it should give you the option to set up Wix Headless. You also have the option to use any existing website for your headless solution as well. So I'm going to go over here from wix.com/developers/headless. You could also sign up through the main Wix homepage as well. And I'm just going to click over here to get started. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and sign up with a new email, and then I'll link back with you in order to show you what the next steps are. Okay, so I've signed up for my new Wix account, and as always with almost any technology, we get to start off with a lovely survey so they can collect data about us and improve their product. So let's go ahead and just kind of work through this. So I'm just going to create a personal project here. My role as a developer. And let's see what business solutions we want to add. So here, if you're not familiar with Wix, so basically when you're building your website, you have the option to add in different apps, which can provide business solutions. And they're all free, and they're out of the box in the sense that you can just add them easily to your site, but not all sites come with them built in. So here, when it comes to headless, you can kind of choose here in advance which solutions you want to use. But you don't have to do it right now. You can also just run through, and then I'm sure you have an option to add additional business solutions if you want later on. CMS I see is built in here. I don't see a reference here to, let's say, the Wix members app, which is typically what controls auth inside of a Wix website. So I'm just going to go ahead and run through and assume that that comes out of the box when you're using headless. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue. And my project is going to be called demo, or I'll call it headless demo just to be a little more specific. And I'm going to go ahead here and click get started. Awesome. So now it's preparing my dashboard. And this dashboard is actually pretty much the same dashboard that you would get if you created a Wix website. So not using the headless, but just a Wix website. The only difference probably is that we can't really edit the website. So if I go here to home, typically in Wix, just so that you have some background, here you would have the option to edit your site, but I don't see that option here at all. Then again, if you are using headless from an existing website, then you would have the option to also edit your Wix site in addition to using your site as a headless solution. And typically that would be found over here in settings. So you see here headless settings. So this is something that you'll have as well inside of a Wix website nowadays. So if you go again here to settings, and then you go here to headless settings, that's where you can find everything regarding headless within both your headless project and regular Wix website projects. So my Next.js app has finished setting up. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup, because when you start like a new Next.js project, just like create React app, so like you get a little bit of stuff that they decided you want here, just kind of to show you how the platform works, I guess, or the framework works. But I don't really want all this here on my homepage. And if you're not familiar with Next.js, I mean, this isn't the Next.js tutorial, but I do want you to understand what's going on. So basically we have this kind of app folder, and this page.js within the app folder, that's essentially like the home page of the website. So that's, like the index HTML, like no path for the slug. So that's here on page.js. And I'm going to show you in a moment how to add in new pages to your website, because we're going to need a page to use for our kind of redirect callback when we're using the Wix auth. But for now, I'm just going to clean up this page over here. So I don't want any of this stuff here. Going to get rid of all that. And what I'll do, I don't need this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'll add in like an H1, and we'll say Wix auth. And what I'm going to do as well is I'm going to just leave this empty. And this is going to be where I'm going to paste some of the code that we have from the Wix tutorial. So again, we don't really need to do a lot ourselves. We can customize the stuff that we get from the Wix tutorial, but it's pretty built out there in terms of code snippets and providing everything for us in advance. So we're pretty much ready to get started with our app. And I'm kind of breaking the order here in terms of setting things up because I want to get started with some of the code before I actually set up the OAuth app. So what we've done so far is we've set up the project, okay, in Wix Headless. And I'm skipping here number 2. And what I'm going to do now is install the SDK. So I'm just going to grab this code over here for npm, and I'm going to go down here into my terminal. Don't need this ports thing. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste those two right over there. Click enter, and that should install both the general Wix SDK and specifically the Wix members part of the SDK, which is what we're going to need for the authentication. And once that's all set up, then Wix instructs us to install a few other things. So we don't really need to install React because Next.js kind of comes with React out of the box. So we don't need to do that. But we will need to install a JS cookie. And we don't really need to install Next server either because Next also comes out of the box. So essentially what we need to install here is just really this JS cookie. And that is the package that Wix has chosen in order to manage the session and store kind of the auth token that we get back from the SDK inside of a cookie. Again, this tutorial is quite opinionated, so it's showing you a very specific way to do it with Next.js and with certain packages, but I do think that they chose an overall good approach, and I think it is a good stepping stone for learning, so that's why we're going through with it. So I'm just going to grab this JS cookie install command from over here, and I'm going to install that as well. Now that we have that all set up, we're ready to create our first login component. And I'm going to build the login component just on the home page. So the home page is going to be where people log in. And in order to do that, first we're going to go ahead and copy over this code over here and put those import statements right over here in the top of our project. So let me close that. And right before the export over here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste these imports. Okay, so essentially we have, let me zoom back out. So we have create client and OAuth strategy from Wix SDK, and we'll see how to use those in a moment. We have members from the Wix members part of the SDK, useEffect and useState. I'm not going to explain what those are. If you don't know, please pause the video and learn a little bit of React. And we have cookies from JS cookies, which we're going to use to store the cookies. One more thing that I'm going to do over here is I'm just going to change this page to be use client. And this has to do with the new, server rendering actions, etc. from Next.js. To be honest, I would not call myself a Next.js expert. I have very preliminary knowledge, and especially after the new updates for Next.js 13. But take my word on it, that's something that we're going to want to do in order to use useEffect and useState, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And let's go ahead to the next step, which is to create the SDK client. Okay, and that's essentially going to be done using this code over here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And I'm also going to put this right over here. I'm going to put it outside of my function. Okay, so outside of my function that renders the component, I'm going to put it outside there. And instead of my Wix client, I'm just going to call it Wix client. Okay, just because, yeah, my Wix client sounds very tutorial-like, and I want my code to be kind of like real. So I'm going to zoom out from there. And now we get to a point where we need our client ID. Okay, so this client ID right over here, and that has to do with setting up the OAuth strategy inside of our Wix dashboard. So let's go over there and set that up and get our client ID and hop back here in order to continue setting up the code. Here I am back in the dashboard. And just to remind you, we want to go here to settings, and then there you're going to find this headless settings right over here. And I'm going to click on that. And this will take us to a page where we can essentially set up an OAuth app. And that's going to help us kind of authenticate versus our website that we have permissions to interact with the Wix Headless part of our website. So I'm going to go ahead and create that OAuth app. And let me just call this, let's call this Next.js tutorial. And I'm going to create the OAuth app. And now you can see here that I have this client ID. Okay, and this client ID is the client ID that we saw mentioned in the code before. So that's what we're going to need to use in order to set up our Wix client through the SDK. You'll also notice here that we have URLs, and we'll talk about that in a moment when we're setting up the whole concept of the redirect. So for now, you can just leave that aside, and when we get to it in the code, I will hop back here in order to set up the redirect domains and the authorized redirect URLs. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this client ID, and I'm going to head back into our project to use it over there. So I've gone ahead and I've pasted my client ID right over here. And there's different ways that we can handle this. If you're doing like a larger project, I would recommend storing it maybe as an environment variable. Within Next.js, you could have like public environment variables. For the sake of this tutorial, since we're really just going to have 2 pages on our entire website, I'm just going to store this kind of in a global variable. So let's do const Wix client ID and just store this kind of in a string. And then I can use this within my code. So over here, where it says client ID, I'm just going to replace that with the variable that we copied over. So Wix client ID. Okay, so we managed to set that up. And now we can go ahead and move on to including our state. Okay, so we're going to have a state within React that is going to store our member information. So when we've successfully logged a member in, then we're going to have a state that stores it. So I'm going to copy that over, and I'm going to put that right over here, again, within this home page. Okay, so we have member state, and then we're going to have various functions which handle the member session. So we're going to have one function, and again, Wix has kind of written these all out in advance, so I'm just copying and pasting the code snippets, and I'm going to try and explain them as we go. So we have this function which fetches the member, so I'm going to put that right over here. And essentially what this does is it calls our client, and again, just a reminder, we changed the name of the client. So I'm going to do Wix client and Wix client over here. And essentially what this does is it checks if the member is logged in. So Wix client.auth.logged in. And apparently, based on this, the syntax here, if there is a member logged in, then it will return this member. Okay? And if that does not come back, then we await Wix client.members.getMyMember, which I guess fetches the member from the backend. Okay, so that's what goes on over here. And then we call setMember, which is part of, again, React and using state. And we set the state of the member to be the member that came back. Okay, again, I don't know if this is exactly how I would write the code if it was my own code, but I'm going to trust Wix that at least it works and it does give us a basic understanding of what's going on. So we're going to use it as kind of boilerplate for our own project. The next thing that we have is we have a login function. So I'm just going to copy that right over here and paste it again. And what this does is it is used to log in our member if our member is logged out. So there's a few stuff that happens over here. So first we need to call this generate OAuth data. Okay, and what we need to set over here is 2 things. So one thing here is a callback URL. So here they've called it login callback, and that indicates to us what we'll need to call our own page that we set up, or we can change this kind of path over here to whatever our redirect will be. But essentially, this is a URL that Wix is going to redirect the user back to as part of the authentication process. And there's going to be some code that we're going to set up on that page as well to complete the authentication process. But it's very important that you have that page on your site and that this URL points to that page, sorry. And here what we have is the current URL so that we know where we came from when we started the authentication process. So that's essentially what we have over here. And then we're also storing the OAuth redirect data inside of local storage. Okay. The next thing that we do is we get an auth URL over here, And we do that by calling wix client.auth.getURLData. And then we essentially redirect the user over here to that new auth URL to begin the authentication process. Okay, I'm just kind of explaining the code that Wix already wrote. And if you take a look at the documentation, as we'll take a peek together later on, we'll see a little bit more about the explanations and the logic between each thing. And it's not set in stone that you have to do it exactly like this. I really want to stress that. This is just one way to do it that Wix recommends or is kind of thinks is an easy starting point or a quick start for us. So that's the login function. And the next thing we're going to want to do also is to implement a logout function as well. So an ability to log the user out. So I'm going to copy over that function here. And what we're going to do is, so logout URL equals await wix client.auth.logout, and then remove the session. So cookies.remove session. This is kind of like a preview of what's going to happen later on. So essentially, we are going to store the whatever kind of token we get back from Wix inside of a cookie called session. So as during the process of logging out, we essentially need to get rid of that cookie. Otherwise, the browser will still think that we're logged in. Okay, so that's essentially what happens over here. And the next thing that we're going to do here is call fetch member when in a useEffect. Okay, so I'm going to copy that over, put that right over here. And essentially what this means is that as soon as our page loads, we are going to try and fetch a member. Okay, and if there is no member, then essentially our member will just be undefined. Okay. The next thing that we have over here is a UI. So Wix kind of built out this UI for us in advance. Again, I'm just going to use it so that we don't have to think too much. So I'm going to just copy that over, and I'm going to replace this return over here with the UI that they built. And I'm going to put my my H1 back in. So H1, let's call it Wix auth. Awesome. And yeah, so I'm not gonna explain this line by line, but basically it's a UI which will render differently if the user is logged in or logged out. So if they're logged out, then it will essentially allow us to click on a button that will log them in. And if they're logged out, if they're logged in, then it will have a button that will allow us to log out. And essentially it's just using this right over here. So this we need to change, obviously, to Wix client. And this also needs to be changed to Wix client. Whoops. Wix client. This will, oh my, Wix client. This also will need to change to Wix client. And now I kind of just remembered that possibly here as well. Yeah, we have some stuff to change to Wix client as well. Let me just do a search. I'm just going to do a replace everything. So find my Wix client, and I'm going to replace it with Wix client. Yeah, let's do it the smart way. Okay, awesome. So that should deal with all of that. And again, just to give you like the gist of it, so we have, they set it up as sections. I don't know, I'd probably do it maybe as a button, but again, this is stuff that you can customize later on in your project. And essentially, it checks if the user is logged in, and if they're not logged in, and then depending on if they're logged in or logged out, it will call either the logout or login function. Okay, so that's pretty much what we said over here. And we can see here now that all of our functions are kind of activated and are being called somewhere in the page. So let me just see here if we have any other instructions here. So this is in terms of our homepage. So what I'm going to do now before we move on to step 3 is I'm going to save this, and I'm going to run here our dev server, or kind of run like a dev build of the project. So it's just like npm run dev, and this will run the project on our local host, so we can take a look and see what this looks like. So I'm just going to control follow link, and let's see what this looks like here on localhost. Might take a second. Okay, awesome. So this this kind of weird background that you see, that's just because of the default CSS that Next.js puts in there when you create a new project. But again, I'm not really going for aesthetics here. I'm going more for functionality. So this is the UI that Wix help us set up. And this login button is what we're going to be able to click theoretically in order to begin the login process. But as you can see, it's telling me that I have an invalid redirect URI. Okay, and essentially what that means is that the URL that we want to redirect the user to, which if I recall correctly was called like login callback or something like that, is not set up inside of our OAuth, inside the headless project, as a permissible redirect URI, and also the domain is not set up. So let me go back here. And because I'm working kind of locally on my own machine, I'm going to set up localhost as the domain that's allowed and also as the callback that's allowed. But if you have your project already, or you're deploying your project to a domain, then you're going to have to use whatever domain you deploy to. And you can also add multiple. So you can have localhost for when you're testing locally, and you can have your own other domain or several domains, and we're going to see that all in a moment. So I'm just going to copy over this localhost, and I'm going to head back to the settings inside of my project so that we can set up this redirect URL. Okay, so here I am back in the dashboard of my headless project, and as you can see, I've set up two things. So one thing here is the redirect domains. So I've set up localhost, and if I wanted to, I could always add in another one right over here. I'm not going to for now. And I've also set up the authorized redirect URIs, which is essentially where we can redirect the user after the login process. And I've used kind of the slug that Wix has set up kind of within the tutorial. So that's what I've done over here. If you're curious what this is over here, I'm pretty curious as well. If I'm not mistaken, it's for kind of a reverse universe. So what we're doing now is we're setting up a project off of Wix, which is using Wix for authentication. But it's possible that the other way around is also something that you can do via Wix Headless. So essentially, to allow users within a Wix page or a Wix website to log in through a third party. It's something that I haven't explored before, to be honest. So I'm kind of curious what that is down there. If you know, comment below, please, and let us share that with us. Okay, so let's head back to our code and complete the setup of the redirect page. So we're up to step 3, and that is to create the callback page. So I'm going to be doing that right over here. So let me go into the Explorer, and within the app directory, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new folder. And the name of the folder is essentially needs to be the name of the URL, the path. So I'm going to call this login callback. Okay. And within that, I'm going to create a page. So page.js. And essentially, this is the page that will display when we follow that URL. And this is all Next.js stuff. So yeah, if you're not from Next.js and you're just kind of from the React world, or not even from the React world, it totally makes sense that you did not understand that. But just trust me that that's what you need to do. So here we are inside of that new page. And what we need to do now is to set up this page to handle the redirect that Wix is going to do. So Wix gives us instructions for that as well. So I'm just going to copy over code. This is really easy, copy paste. And then we're going to as well use the SDK to create our client. Okay, and here on top as well, I'm just going to put that use client. And again, this is a Next.js thing. It's not a Wix thing. Okay, so depending on where you're implementing this, you might not need to have that there at all. And again, here I'm going to rename this to Wix client. And I'm going to need my ID. So let me just copy it over from this page over here. So I'm just going to copy pasta. There we go. So I have my Wix client ID set up, and I'm going to pass it here, Wix client ID. Awesome. So now that we've done that, we can go ahead and create a React component. So I'm going to do that right over here. Get rid of this terminal, blocking the view. Okay, there we go. And here inside of this function or this component, what I'm going to do is set up these two states that Wix instructs us to set up. And we'll talk about what those are in a moment. And let's go ahead and define a function to verify login. So I'm just going to grab that function and put it right over there. And let's see, we'll probably need to change here as well. Yeah, from like my Wix client to Wix client, but I'll do that at the end once everything is set up. But essentially what this function does, the verify login, is it's going to parse the URL. So when Wix redirects, they're going to stuff lots of information there into the URL, and that will be code and state. And essentially, Wix set up a function that kind of parses that URL, gets out the tokens that it needs, and stores those tokens inside of that session cookie that I mentioned earlier. And that's essentially how we can continuously validate that the user is logged in after we complete the authentication process. Okay, and then Wix will send us back essentially to the original URL that we came from. Okay, and that, if you recall, was stored. It's probably also there in the redirect URL because we passed that information when we were creating kind of the OAuth. I forget what it was called, client or something like that. Awesome. So we got that function in there. And we're going to use the useEffect hook to call this, which essentially means that it'll be called as soon as the page loads. So we get to this callback page and it'll call our function immediately. And we also have a UI here that will either render an error message, or it will go to this next page, which is essentially the page that we came from. Okay, let me just see where we're doing it here. So yeah, you can see here, we're setting the next page. Okay, set next page, and we're setting it to be the page that we came from. If you want, you can also set the next page to be something else. It doesn't necessarily need to be the page that you came from. It could be, let's say, they start off on a login page, and then after they're done with the login, you can redirect them to a dashboard page. Okay, it could be something completely different. This is just Wix's assumption that you want to send them back wherever they came from. Great, so I think that is all that we need on terms of this page. So I'm just going to go ahead and do my switch here between my Wix client and Wix client. Again, you don't have to do that. I just kind of, yeah, just to make it seem like a little less copy paste, give a little of my own personal spice in there. And the next step that we're going to do is to create a middleware for managing the tokens. So before we set up the middleware, let me just give like two words about what this middleware is. So essentially, except for only managing authentication and membership, the Wix SDK also manages visitors. So even if we don't manage to authenticate our user versus a member that we have stored kind of inside of our member data, we still might want to keep track of a unique visitor that's visiting multiple pages of our site during one session. And that's essentially what we're creating this middleware for. And it's going to check and see if we have a session stored in our cookies. And if not, it will generate a visitor session, which will help us track this visitor throughout their session. So let's go ahead and set up this middleware file. So I'm going to go here into source, and I'm just going to add file right over here. And I'm going to call this middleware.js. Okay, and here as well, Wix has pretty detailed instructions for how we're going to set this up. So first of all, we're going to import the SDKs. And this middleware, just to give you a little context, again, it's something very specific to Next.js, but it's something that's going to run every time we load a page of our website. So think of it kind of like as a middleware between every call that we make to the server to load a new page. And I'm going to go ahead and paste this over here. I know it was a very superficial explanation, but I don't want this to be about Next.js. I want this to be about Wix Headless. So I imported the modules, and we're going to create a middleware function. So I'm going to copy that over and paste that right over here. And you can see here that this is again creating a Wix client. So we're going to need our client ID over here. So let me just grab that right over here. And I'm going to paste in client ID, make sure that I'm using it here inside of the function itself. So Wix client ID. I'm obviously going to change this to be Wix client instead of my Wix client, and change this here as well. So Wix client. Awesome. So essentially what we're doing here, let's just try and understand what's happening here in this middleware, because I think that that is pretty much done, because here we have the complete code examples. So if you don't want to copy piece by piece like I was doing, you can just go ahead and copy the entire pages. But just to go over what we're doing here in the middleware. So essentially, we're checking to see that if the request, and again, this request is something that comes in through Next.js, but you can kind of think of this as like if you have a server, this could be like middleware to your server as well, or just built into your server itself. And essentially, every time that you get in a request, you check to see if the session cookie came in with that request. And if it did, then you just continue to the next thing that's going to happen inside of the backend processes. And if not, then you go ahead and you create a visitor session using this generate visitor tokens. Can you see that? There we go. Generate visitor tokens. Okay, and then you just return the response from the server. The response from setting the cookie. Okay. Sorry, not the response from setting the cookie, but essentially the response with the cookie. Okay, you're setting a cookie on the response, just to clarify that. Okay, awesome. So now that we're done explaining the middleware, we can go ahead and save all of our pages and hopefully complete a test of our new application. Okay, so I went to test my site and boom, I got this error over here that it can't resolve next server. And I was pretty sure that this is included with the Next.js installation. And I tried various things like going back and trying to install the package again, and just kind of like double checking in my VS Code. And I see that we have Next, and I see that we have server, so it definitely does exist. And I think that the issue might be with how we're importing it over here. Because if I just go ahead and I get rid of this import, so let me just zoom in right over here so you can see what I'm doing. If I go ahead and I get rid of this import and I try to import it myself, so import next response, then you'll see here that it copies it without the first /. Okay, so I think that that might be the issue. So I'm just going to go ahead and save. And let's see if my server manages to deploy now. And let's see if we have any errors here. I don't see any errors coming up. So let's head back to test. So let me go open my site, and yes, and it seems like it's working. Again, so when you're copying and pasting code from tutorials, sometimes things change. It could be that when they did the tutorial, it was one way and now it's a different way, or it's just a typo in the tutorial. But that's why it's always worth kind of thinking about things yourself beyond just copying and pasting code, as useful as it is. Okay, so here we are inside of our app, and at the moment it's saying hello visitor, and that's because it's conditionally, whoops. Okay, I accidentally clicked login, but I discovered another bug, and that's that it's saying that my URI is not approved, my URL. So let me just go back to my app, and let's see, and I think that the issue is that I just didn't click save. Okay, so after you set up the authorized URI, so you go ahead and click save over here, of course, and now my auth app was updated. So let's head back to our site. And again, it's saying hello visitor because it's like conditionally says visitor when there's nobody logged in. So I'm just going to go ahead and try clicking that login button again. Awesome. So let's see. Boom. Okay, so this is the classic Wix login page. So for those of you who are not familiar, you've never seen a Wix website before, if you add like the member app to your Wix website, then this is what the login page is going to look like. Okay, and you'll see here that I have the option also to sign up. So if I'm not logged in, if I'm not already a member on this website, I can go ahead here and click sign up. And this is what Wix offers out of the box. So you get sign up with Google, sign up with Facebook, and sign up with email. So if you want to have other ways of allowing your members to log in, then Wix Auth might not be the solution for you. But if you're looking for an easy way to log your members in with Google, Facebook, and email, then that's awesome. And I'm pretty sure you'll also have control over, let's say, not allowing the social logins and only allowing the sign up with email. I'm just going to do email because I just want to make up a random email. So I'm just going to say aton plus tester1 at the wixwiz.com. And my password will be, and then I'm going to click I'm not a robot, and I'm going to sign up. Awesome, loading, and boom. So I saw a lot of errors there. And that was, I guess, just inside of the redirect page, like while everything there was processing, it took some time, so it displayed kind of the error message. That's probably something you'd want to fix in your own app. So let's just open up, and I see here now that it says hello log out, which indicates that I'm kind of logged into the website, so that's nice. And let's go ahead and inspect over here, go into the console, and okay, Wix members, Wix client.members.getMyMember is not a function. Interesting. Yeah, so I think that these are all errors that are related to maybe the fact that the React approach that they took in Wix might not be 100% aligned with like the most modern React setup, I have a feeling. Or I did something wrong in copying and pasting all the code, but let's go ahead and check and see what we have here in application. And you can see over here that we have a cookie that's stored over here. So I'm here inside of my cookies, localhost 3000. And over here we have a cookie called session. And with the access token, oh no, you saw my access token. Okay, I'm just kidding. And that is basically the cookie that we can use to go ahead and authenticate this user. Okay, so either if we want to continue making requests to other Wix SDKs like the CMS or business solutions, then we can use that auth token in order to kind of indicate that it's this member who's making the request, or we can just go ahead and build our application out separately and just use the auth SDK and just check if members are logged in, and if they're logged in, to give them various permissions via our servers and whatnot. Okay, so that is just showing you here that we have the session token and it's working. So let's see what happens here if I go and I log out. Then you see the session token disappeared and it reappeared, but that, if I'm not mistaken, is the visitor token. So essentially what we did is we replaced my my member token with a visitor token. And then if I'm going to go over here and try and log in again, let's see what'll happen over here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to log in with email, and I'm going to log in with the same user that I had before. So tester1 at the wixwiz.com. And here, my code, password, log in, and boom. So you see here now again that the session was replaced from a visitor token to a member token. And even if I go ahead and I, let's say, refresh the page over here, then my session is persisted. Okay, so even if I open a new browser tab or whatever, it still remembers that I'm currently this logged in member, as you would expect from like any kind of OAuth application or authentication solution. So that is kind of the very, very basics of what we've done over here. And I want to hop over now into the dashboard of the CMS in order to show you, sorry, not the CMS, the dashboard of our Wix Headless, and show you kind of what it looks like from that side. Okay, so here I am back in the Wix dashboard, and as you can see, I already have this notification here in my activity feed that indicates that I have a new site member. And this is one of the cool perks of using like third-party authentication solutions. I'm not saying Wix is completely unique in this sense, but essentially beyond just actually managing state and session and authentication inside of your application, you usually also get some kind of dashboard or something in order to manage those members and keep track of who's using your website and whatnot. So that you can do through this dashboard as well. And if you want to find kind of a list of all your members and stuff, then you can go over here on the side. You have this right over here, contacts. And if you go over here, you have site members. And then essentially you can see a list of all the people who have signed up to your site. So as the site owner yourself, you'll also be kind of you'll be a member by default. But here is the new site member, and you can see like when the last login was, different roles that you've assigned, and you can also manually go ahead and like block members, delete members, and stuff like that. So it gives you like a little bit of control over who's using your website and stuff like that, beyond just the user experience within the application itself. So this actually took a little longer than I was expecting. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pause here. I know that I promised a little more, so I'm going to save that for a later tutorial. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, you think it's interesting, you're like a web developer who's thinking of using Wix as your authentication solution, do me a favor and give a thumbs up to the video. And if the video, not if, but when the video gets 50 thumbs up, I will work on creating a tutorial which really goes like in depth and analyzes the different methods that we have within this authentication SDK and shows you how to implement it, let's say like on a vanilla JavaScript server, as opposed to just using kind of the boilerplate tutorial that Wix provided, just because I want to make sure that there's actually interest before I go ahead and spend another hour on that. So if you like this video, if you find it interesting, you want to learn more about this topic, please hit that thumbs up button just so that I know. If you have any questions or you want to kind of share your own use cases, then please leave a comment below. And if you want to see more videos like this about Wix and web dev and stuff like that, then please subscribe to the channel, and I will